Hello and welcome to Catholic in America. Today we're going to be talking about the My Truth movement.
Yes, indeed.
So Father Tom, we're talking about the My Truth movement. What do we mean by that? When you hear that term My Truth, what do we mean by that? What's going on in society?
Yeah, my truth. It automatically makes my skin crawl. I think we've all heard it. You've heard it. I've heard it, which is that this is my truth, and your truth can be your truth. My truth is my truth, and so let's just all get along.
Yeah.
The exaltation of tolerance.
Yeah.
And tolerating all views and opinions, and that everyone has a right to their own perspective. Everyone has a right to their own truth. And for the most part, underlying it is the fact that everyone's own perception dictates reality for them.
Yeah. I mean, that really is it, isn't it? Perception is reality. I mean, in some ways we have to accept that in the sense of when someone's perceiving something a particular way and there's no changing their mind, we have to accept that that's their reality. But that doesn't mean it's the reality that's actually happening, the objective reality here. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about objectivity and all of that as well. But I mean, there are some circumstances where my truth does work, right? I mean, like if we're talking about ice cream, I mean, what's your favorite ice cream?
Well, yes, obviously, like we all have taste, but
Yeah.
I mean, we both studied philosophy. I mean, but Aristotle, who is the student of Plato, talked about that taste and our taste in music, our taste in food, taste is entirely subjective. And for the most part, like taste, it's like also your taste in art. Like that's where you also get this term that many people are familiar with. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
But what Aristotle was not talking about there, though, was that all beauty is purely a matter of taste or of your own subjective opinion.
Right.
And which is kind of what this whole thing goes back to, is this like this notion that your taste dictates reality, or likewise my perspective dictates how I view reality, and therefore my reality is my reality and yours is yours. Versus like, yeah, my favorite ice cream, like I just objectively speaking, obviously, is that a chocolate chip cookie dough is the best, right?
Right. Well,
Right.
well,
Who are you to tell me that your mint chocolate chip or your nasty vanilla bean is better?
I don't know, peanut butter cup, man. That's the way
Oh,
to go.
dude, that's gross,
the way
man.
to go. Yeah, that's the way to go. So, but no, there is to a certain extent that these kind of conversations over things that are subjective comes into the objective. I mean, it kind of seeps in that's the way I see things, and so for me, the way I see things is the way I see reality, and so that's what makes it right. That's what makes my opinion right over your opinion, because I mean, right now, what's going on in society, we do have some objectives. We do have some things that are objective truths in society, but boy, they just keep fading, don't they? They're less and less.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we would agree that me and you agree that there's objective truths in society, but that's the whole thing with our growing society, which is becoming more and more relativistic, where they believe that, again, all truth is relative. Everyone determines the truth for themselves. But no, obviously, like that flies in the face of just basic reason. Like
Right.
that's the thing. Is you think about this, you think about relativism long enough, and like you start realizing that no, there are certain things that are objective, and this is not even a question of faith. It's just a question of reason, and using our reason is to recognize that no, there are certain things that are objective. Like for instance, like seemingly we thought for hundreds of years that at least science was semi-objective, right?
Right.
Now people are starting to challenge even the boundaries of science and the natural world and biology and the body and so forth.
Right. What are some things that you think would be the objective truths that we all agree on right now that you would say even someone who believes in my truth would believe? I mean, this is objective truth even with them. I mean, what are some of the things that you think would be there?
Apart from divine revelation, I think that just basic reason that we exist.
Yeah.
So like the whole question of like existence, like do we exist? Do we both exist right now? I think that like first of all, you have to ground things in like what comes first. Does our knowledge of reality come first, or does reality come first? you have Descartes' famous phrase, "Sum cogito sum," which is "I think, therefore I am," right?
Yeah.
Which
Right.
is what Descartes was getting at right there, who's the famous philosopher from the Renaissance, right? Is the idea is that he's saying the only thing which I know which is true, because I mean he lived in the time of skepticism and where people were starting to challenge all presuppositions and say you can't trust the church, you can't trust all these things. So like Descartes, where we get Cartesian thought, he said "Sum cogito sum." The only thing which I do presuppose is that I think, therefore I am. I exist because I'm thinking. Right.
Right.
So, but it's like you get this question of what do we know as the basis of objective reality is that like reality does exist. I mean, now
Right.
we're having people who are challenging reality itself, challenging that maybe reality doesn't exist. But no, like reality does exist, and I think that's the starting point. Is like, do we believe that reality exists? And how many realities are there? Are there 100,000 realities? Is there a multiverse of realities, or is there one reality that all of us are a small part of?
Right. Right. And I think that's, I think that's the question. But I think some of these objective things that even someone who'd be considered a relativist, I mean, specifically even a moral relativist, there's particular things that we all agree. I mean, like none of us believe you should steal. We always, I mean, we believe that stealing is not appropriate. We all believe that murder is inappropriate. I mean, there's things like that we all agree on that in society. Whether you're
Well, I mean, but that's the point, though. Is the thief? The
yeah.
thief doesn't agree with that, nor does the murderer or the
Right.
sociopath and psychopath who's going to go out. I mean, does people who are killing people right now? They don't agree
Yeah.
that murder is always wrong,
Right.
and just like they don't
Or that
agree
it
that
can be justified. They believe maybe it can be justified. Yeah.
yeah, it can be justified. But if it can be justified, then it's not always wrong.
Correct. Yeah.
So, I mean, you will always find fringe people who live on the fringes who take these fringe theories and will take these fringe philosophies or outtakes on life. And I mean, you can always find a person who classically we've understood is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the thing. It's like when you deny reality
Right.
and when you deny the reality of which we all exist in and which we are all a part of, like classically understood that like, this was the type of person who was crazy or the lunatic.
Right.
Actually, I came across a funny, I don't know if you know this, Father Doug, but I came across an interesting thing from Matthew chapter 4 when people are bringing all the sick to Jesus. And then it says that they brought to Jesus the lunatics, right? And the lunatics who they brought to Jesus, who, again, the line between the lunatic and the possessed is very thin.
Right. Very thin.
And then you
Yeah.
get like, but the definition, I wasn't even aware of this until recently, but the word which is used to describe the lunatic in Scripture is the moonstruck.
Okay.
Those who have been struck by the moon, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So in association with that, it's also the people who look to the moon, the stars, the planets, right? People who like can come up with all these crazy, obtuse, esoteric theories that are out in the stars and out in the multiverse and things like that. It's like you can always find a person who can come up with something which is extreme and crazy. But the whole point being is like commonly most people recognize that no, like some of these outlandish theories and outlandish philosophies, like we don't even exist. Like we're all just phantasms living on the back of a dead god, and that reality doesn't like. But the understanding is commonly these are the lunatics, these are the crazies, these are the people like you'd have to have a doctoral degree from some of the Ivy League schools to believe some of these things.
Sure. I mean, the denial of reality, the maybe not even necessarily the denial of objectivity, which to believe in a reality, there needs to be something objective about it, something that's common that we all see, believe, and understand what it is. But yeah, the denial of reality itself is what happens. And yeah, I mean, those people are the ones that, people use that term crazy, that we say that they have a mental illness or there's something going on in their head, whatever we use. It's usually people who deny reality, usually people who say that they're seeing the same thing that we are and they're calling it something else.
Yeah, this all started to a certain degree with like the moral relativism, which we've seen over the last 30, 40 years as society and people, individuals, and even groups are starting to say, no, okay, all morality, like there are no objective moral norms that guide universal human behavior. So like the moral relativism, which we've seen, and I think that a lot of probably our viewers are familiar with. If you're not familiar with it, it's that right? There is no objective moral truths. There are no objective, which are always true in all space and time. Like regardless, murder is always wrong. Like
Right.
the unjust killing of an innocent person, not killing, because most people don't agree that killing is always wrong.
Different.
But murder,
Yep.
the unjust killing of the unjust killing of an innocent person, right? Most people, and as well as what you were saying before, Father Doug, is that like stealing, like taking someone else's property, illegitimate taking of someone's property, that's always wrong. But now we live in a society where over the last 30, 40 years, people have said, well, no, it's not always wrong. It's not always wrong to murder. Like now, like you can come up with cases where murder could possibly be legitimate. There are no universal moral norms
Right.
that
Right.
dictate human
Yeah.
behavior. As people have pushed back more and more at God, and even the very idea of God, now they're pushing back at the very idea of universal moral norms, which even the pagans, like in like the ancient Greek world, recognize that no, there are universal moral norms. Like
Right. Right.
that's what they understood to be the virtuous culture, the virtuous person. But now, as relativism has taken over, and that now people are starting to believe that there are no universal moral norms or no universal virtues or truths. Now, as moral relativism has taken over, now we live in a society where people are starting to challenge and think that everything is relative, including biology. Like the one thing that we could always agree on, even with an atheist or with an agnostic, is right. At least that science, like at least biology and things like this. But now, not only is it moral relativism, now even biological relativism.
Right. I saw a video the other day. It was a interview that on one of the major networks, and they were interviewing a lady, and she was. I think she was a part of Black Lives Matter, but I'm not sure about that. But she was telling the host of the show that 2 + 2 = 4 is racist. That's a racist thing.
I haven't seen that, but I have actually heard that
Yeah,
math.
and that why does 2 + 2 always have to equal 4? Why can't it equal 5 or 3 or whatever I think is true? And that's where we get into what the show's really about, which is we get into my truth. What is my truth? So as you've probably experienced this. I know you're close to a college campus. You deal with high school students all the time. What do people mean when they say this is my truth?
Well, it's. I mean, that's the problem. Is like it can mean any number of things depending upon the individual, because every individual gets to determine their own perspective, their own truth. Because the word truth is oftentimes means the same thing as perspective. So my perspective is my truth,
Yeah.
right? And so there's a loss of the simple understanding of the difference between perspective, which is subjective truth, like my subjective view,
The way I see things.
yeah, the way that I see things, which is versus the actual object itself that I'm observing. It's like there's this understanding is that my reality is the only thing which can dictate and determine for me how I see things. And so, like you have this notion of like the difference between subjectivity and objectivity, which has become conflated because you have most people who sometimes don't even understand these two terms. Like now, we're having that people believe that subjectivity, like my subjective opinion or perspective, dictates reality itself, at least insofar as I'm concerned, and therefore you have to keep people separate and perspectives separate, because insofar as like your perspective makes me uncomfortable, right? I have to have my safe space.
Right.
I have to have my safe space where my perspective is protected, and you can have your safe space over here where your perspective is protected. And let's not have any conflict, because conflict, understood in this very simplistic, is conflict is bad.
Yeah.
Even though if you have an understanding of conflict from a healthy psychological, we know that conflict is good. Like conflict is the basis of dialogue and of growing to an appreciation of the objective reality. That my reality, my perspective, is not the only thing which forms truth. But no, like truth is something which is bigger than all of our individual perspectives.
Yeah, but don't you think that's where some of this comes from? It is that I don't want to be convinced that what I believe or what I think is wrong. I like what I believe. I like what I think. So that's my truth. And there's really no point in us having dialogue about this, because you're not going to change my opinion on it. I want to hold this. This is my truth. And so what your truth is really doesn't matter. I mean, you hear people say that all the time. What your truth is really doesn't matter. Or they'll say, they'll make a statement and the other person they'll say, well, that's your truth. And then it's almost as if that cuts off all dialogue, because you have to respect that that's that person's truth. In other words, it really is more of this is that their belief, and it's what they are choosing to hold to, as opposed to what really is objectively truth. I mean, it seems to me that that's really what kind of is going on here is that someone isn't really looking necessarily for objective truth. They're looking for the truth that they want to hold on to. And maybe we aren't willing to phrase it that way because of how it sounds. I mean, it doesn't sound very good to say it that way, but it seems like that's the truth here. It seems like that what's happening is that they're willing to say, this is my truth and that's your truth, and we don't really need to, if we discuss this, it's only going to cause an argument and a shouting match. And what happens is you lose dialogue. You don't have the opportunity to interact with ideas and come to a particular truth that maybe we agree on.
Well, but the thing, I mean, simply for the Doug, like go back like 15 years ago. Like how would we have talked about these things 15 years ago? My opinion, right? This is my opinion. But if you say opinion, this is my opinion or my perspective, right? That's open to a certain degree of humility, recognizing that it's an opinion, right? You also have to know what an opinion is versus truth.
Right.
Right? Because truth is objective and it's also unchanging. That's why people like the word truth.
Truth, because an opinion can change.
Because an opinion can change and truth does not change, right? That's the very definition of truth, right? So people they have this loose terminology, but this is where, like, I had one of my favorite professors in the seminary used to say, sloppy speech, messy mind.
Yeah.
Get you in trouble every time, right? Now, he's a lawyer, right? Canon lawyer and a civil lawyer. He's a brilliant man. Monsignor Andy Anderson, who's the head tribunal judge for Miami down for years. But, I mean, that's such a, for me, it's such a great phrase. Sloppy speech, messy mind gets you in trouble every time, right? Because when you use the word truth, like the reason why we gravitate towards the truth, because we actually, as human beings, we are called to encounter truth, because in that we find eternal stability, right? Which is also one of the ways in which we brush the hand of God, right? It's not, now we not might grasp the hand of God, but we definitely brush the hand of God. We encounter God through truth. And that's why, because truth is unchanging. And that's what makes truth truth. That's also why a person wants to say today, who doesn't want to change their mind, which is to a certain extent, is that you're closed to humility.
Yep.
Right? So they want to say my truth, as opposed to, no, it's my perspective. My perspective on this is this, or my opinion is on that. But like if you say my perspective, my opinion, like you are open to the fact you could be wrong.
Correct.
Right? Versus truth. Like that's so there's this, so you are absolutely correct. It's like this pushing away of dialogue. It's this pushing away of other people's perspectives, which could possibly influence me to change. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know everything. Yeah, Father Doug, I have a hard time even talking about some of this stuff because I feel like we're just spinning our wheels right now because we're not really talking about anything because this doesn't make sense. Like a lot of this doesn't make sense. The moral relativism doesn't make sense. Relativism in general doesn't make sense. Like I mean, it does make sense to us from a certain perspective. I understand that, but I'm just like it's hard to talk about this because in all of this language, all language itself becomes completely fluid. Yeah. Everything becomes fluid. Like language becomes fluid, meaning becomes fluid. Our definitions of things like are not static, like the meaning of things. That's why like we're getting into crazy land.
Well, it's almost like trying to catch water in your hands. At some point, it's gonna leak out. I mean, that's kind of what happens with these conversations is because it's hard to put your hands on an opinion that really changes from person to person. Who actually believes my truth or actually believes in relativism. It's hard to put your hands on it because it changes with each person you talk to. What it means, how it works.
Well, Father Doug, one of my least favorite school's academic subjects in philosophy was epistemology.
Yeah.
Which is the study of how do we know things, right? I much preferred metaphysics as opposed to epistemology because, like, how do I know things? And like, I'm just like, we know certain things, but then now we get into this whole epistemological argument of how do we know things, right? But because then we're getting into a question of like, how do I know if what I believe or what I perceive, and that's the line between perception and belief is sometimes very thin. Like, so how do I know if what I believe or I perceive is actually true of the object that I'm looking at?
Right.
So
Yeah, that I mean that really is the question is how is there at some point that your truth and my truth are going to come into conflict?
Well, and that's the thing is like when you do have two people who have a different perspective on a particular object, whether that object is a thing or it's reality itself, or even more dangerously, if it's how I feel,
Right,
and then do my feelings dictate reality of who I am, or are my feelings come and go?
right.
Because then you get into a question of how do we define ourselves? How do we define not just other objects other than ourselves, but how do we define ourselves? But then you
So,
have this clash with what if
yeah,
I believe, or what if I feel, or what if my truth is that I'm a turtle,
right,
right? And then
right,
this comes into conflict now with your truth, right?
right,
Your subjective, which is like you're no Father Tom, you're not a turtle,
right,
you're a man, you're a human
right,
being, you happen to be a Catholic priest, and I'm like, well, no, I'm a turtle. Like
right.
now we have these two perspectives, these two truths, my truth and your truth. And then the
Yeah.
question is like, do we have to respect both of these? Right?
Well,
Because what happens because there's this false narrative which is present in this is that okay, we can just coexist peacefully and like your perspective is not going to hurt me and my perspective won't hurt you. Let's not hurt each other.
right,
Right? As
right.
opposed to no, like you should like rightfully so, at least from my perspective, you should say no, Father Time, you're crazy. You're not a turtle.
Right. Well, I mean, there is at some point where the rubber meets the road with this stuff. I was talking to someone who works at the hospital, works at the front desk at the hospital, and there's a person come in and they were telling them that they needed help, and so for their race, they put tiger. They
Yes.
were a tiger.
I've heard,
And
I've
so,
heard
the,
I've heard of
so
such things.
yeah, exactly. So the front desk person was telling me, they said they looked at it and they said, they looked at the person and said, I'm sorry, I think you're in the wrong place. And they said, what do you mean? And she said, well, if you're a tiger, you probably need to go to the veterinarian. We need to know if you're human or not. I mean, that's where your truth at some point doesn't matter. My
No,
truth at
what
some
matters
point,
is What matters is reality. But then the
yes,
question, but that's the whole thing is if we can't come to a basic understanding of what is real and what is not real, right? Regardless of your perspective,
yeah,
regardless of your opinion, regardless of your truth or my truth. And that's what I'm saying. Like the whole
yeah,
your truth, my truth movement is chaos.
yes,
It's absolutely chaotic. It's fundamentally chaotic because it denies whether it's overtly or subversively, it denies that we're all part of one reality. Like, no, there is one truth, and the
right,
one truth, whether you want to call it God or not, I mean, is irrelevant to a certain extent. Like, we have to agree that reality exists,
yes,
right? Just as functional human beings, not even with divine revelation, just as functional human beings, we have to recognize that reality exists. There is one capital T truth.
yep,
Now, I would say that obviously we would both agree that behind reality is God Himself who created it. But even if you can't,
absolutely,
even if you're an atheist, even if you're an agnostic, we still have to agree that there is a reality. There's not 500 billion realities. We don't live in a multiverse as much as
right.
people as entertaining and as maybe as seductive as that theory is. No, we live in a
Although
universe.
I find it confusing every time I watch Marvel. So
That's because they like. And you'll notice that there's a lot of chaos.
yeah, I
That's
get
the theme of
a little
chaos in
confusing.
that.
Yeah,
Right,
but
but here's the thing: is like the whole point. I think that we have to get to as a society, but also as individuals, even if we're going to maintain our own coherency and our own mental health, is
right,
recognizing that no, like our perspectives are going to inevitably clash, and we have to not just tolerate each other, we have to love each other,
yeah,
and to enable and to feed into this mentality, which is that we have to make a safe place for everyone's perspective, even if it's crazy and insane.
right,
Like we're only actually increasing the problem. We're hurting people by not reaching out and saying that no, you're not a cat. No, you're not a turtle. No, you're not a boy if you're a girl, or a
right,
girl if you're a boy. No, like these things, like they're not like you can come up with 100,000 crazy theories to justify it, right?
right,
But at the end of the day, like our perspectives, we live in one reality. Like
right.
and we have to love each other, not tolerate each other.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, some of the roots of this, though. I mean, um, the we've been seeing some of this coming on for hundreds of years. I mean, you've seen some of this that popped up in the Enlightenment. what part or what role has religion played in this? I mean, because I think we don't come out of this unscathed. I mean, Christianity, religious belief in general, belief in God in general. I don't think we come out of this unscathed. I mean, we take some blame in this too. I mean, what are some of the roots of this? Where do you see this happening, and why? I mean, how do you think we've gotten here to a certain extent?
Well, I think that it's also to recognize like the moral relativism and this whole stuff is all for the most part a Western civilization problem. Like this is not really going on in Asia to the degree it is in our, at least where it's actually coming and being a problem in Asia or in other parts of the world is where there's American Western influence, where we're pushing this ideology upon other peoples. But for the most part, this is not.
You're saying in Iran, they're not
No,
about what
and in Africa, like Africa, they're not entertaining
Right.
this garbage philosophy in Africa, or
Right.
even in South America. Like there's parts of it which is being influenced by the West, but for the most
Right.
part, this decadent, this terrible philosophy is being pushed. But for the most part, like good chunks of the world, this is a Western problem, and I think that a lot of it for me goes back to. I mean, it goes back to the Renaissance and before. It goes back to William of Ockham and nominalism from the 1300s, right, where he started challenging the universals and universal concepts. Where Ockham said that look, names are just names; we can't speak about them logically in terms of how they reveal universal truth. So it goes back to, I think, to me, for Ockham, which most
Right.
people are probably not familiar with Ockham, but Ockham is a logician who kind of spawned the Renaissance, but the skeptical side of the Renaissance and the skeptical side of the Enlightenment period, right, where everyone started challenging and challenging the presuppositions of what had been. So I think it goes back to that. It was taken up by various different Enlightenment thinkers, and then like obviously you have the Protestant Reformation, which was the breakdown in the church. And that was the breakdown of the church was due to a lot of the corruptions that were present in the church. Like the Renaissance and the Reformation thinkers, like a lot of them had good points, but they took
Right.
it too far. Like, and that's the whole thing. They took it too far, and now we're just seeing the natural consequence of this play out. Because I think that without the Reformation, you don't have the modern day atheist humanist movement. Without the modern day atheist humanist movement, you don't have all this crazy cultural relativism. I mean, moral
Right.
relativism, and now the relativism that we exist in as a society today.
Right. Proof of that is like you said, you didn't have this going on in other parts of the world. You had it mainly in Europe and in America, and so that's where you see this happening the most. Probably in Australia too, and more of the English-speaking and European countries. You're right. You don't have this in other parts of the world, and so I mean, you can see that influence as it's strand and as it's provoked and continues to come forward to us from religion itself, but in society itself too, the way people think. Because let's face it, I mean, the church for years and years and years, specifically in the universities, was the way to think. I mean, it was what had grounded the universities. It's where, well, it's actually where they came from. And so, I mean, most people may not realize the roots of places like Harvard, and realizing and understanding that those were bastions of Christian educators, Christian thinkers, and to get to where we've come today. It's happened through that moral breakdown, but it's also happened through that theological breakdown, that questioning of truths itself, not just the truth of objectivity, like the truth of theology itself. Is there a God? Is there not a God? But the questioning of all things, like you said, the questioning of all things is really what led us to a certain extent to where we are now, and that it's not prevalent all over the world. It's prevalent just in the places where you
No,
find this.
Western civilization. But I do think this that if Western civilization doesn't wake up, it's also the sign of imminent collapse.
Right.
Because it's the sign right now. It's a sign of social psychological. These are signs of social psychological collapse. Like when people can't
Yeah.
understand basic realities, and now people are starting to challenge basic realities. Like this is a symptomatic sign of an imminent collapse unless it reverses. I'm not saying that it's the end of the world. It just might be the end of Western civilization as we know it.
Could be
Because
the end of the United States. Could be the end of parts of Europe. I mean, yeah, it could mean that there's whatever happens when a society
Right.
falls.
But before the body collapses, oftentimes there's a mental collapse, and this is what we're starting to see is like throughout Western civilization, we're starting to see a mental collapse, and it's one of the reasons why, in my opinion, like you have the rise of such mental disease, which is on the rise because people are as a society, we are mentally collapsing. And when you mentally collapse, like you can only continue for so long. And like these movements that are coming are signs that we either need to reverse course and we need to go back to some stable principles and stable values, or else we will collapse and be replaced by something else.
Right. So just a quick question before we close. What do you think the way forward would be, taking into consideration what you were just saying there? What would be some ways that we could begin to move forward where we are now? I realize that in some ways it'd be easier.
Well,
to
I'd say, I mean,
we can't, but you know,
the simple answer I'd say is repent and believe in the gospel. So repent and believe in the gospel. Like listen to Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. As Pilate turns to Peter and he says, "The truth, what is that?" Right. So I think that grabbing on to Jesus as the only one who can actually save us from the chaos, which is swallowing us. So to a certain extent, like that's the simple but profound answer.
Right. Which means what we're calling people to do who are sitting in our pews right now, what we're being called to do by Pope Francis, what we're being called to do by Bishop Bill and the bishops of the United States, what hopefully our pastors are calling their people to do in the pews, which is to share the gospel. Yes. I mean, it really is the way forward, is to share the gospel. I've said this for quite a while that there's lots of ills that are going on in society that, there's certain laws that are on the books. Yes, we don't want them on the books. We'd rather them not be there. But if no one's using that right that's being given to them on the books, then the book, what's on the books isn't as important as what's in the heart. And so if we really want America to change for the good, if we really want America to come back to reality, if we really want America to be who she was supposed to be, who we were all taught that she was to be, I mean, really the way forward is a change of heart. I mean, it really is. And that heart that comes, the only heart that can really change it and lead to what we're talking about is believing the gospel. Yeah. Believing the gospel and sharing the gospel with those around them. So our bishop was very prophetic in that, and writing his pastoral letter on sharing the faith, sharing the gift, and that's what we're called to do, and that's ultimately what will save America. And I know that for someone who's not Catholic, for someone who's not Christian, that probably sounds simplistic. But the truth of the matter is with any complex issue, you got to start somewhere.
Well, but I think that also more, and maybe another way of looking at it is like, what are we called to do? We're called to stand in the truth. We're called to live the truth. We're called to protect the truth. We're not called to shove it down people's throats. Right? You don't take the sort of truth and shove it down someone's throat. But we are called to recognize the truth. And there's a certain point where I can't force another person to believe or to understand or to have knowledge of something, but I can do it for myself. And like I can maintain my own sanity, like in the midst of this insane world. Like I can maintain my own sanity by recognizing that one, there is truth, and if I grab onto objective truth, then likewise that we'll be fine.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I think that's the whole thing is regardless of what happens within society as a whole, as long as we maintain and hold on to the truth, like we will be on the ark, right? We will persevere. We will be fine. So I think that recognizing that there is truth and that we are called to live in it, abide by it, and feed on it is predominantly what we're called to be and to do.
Well, thank you, Father Tom, for this discussion, and thank you for joining us here on Catholic in America.
Whatever the original intent for social media was, it probably wasn't this.
Well, I'm sure you've seen this viral video.
And to the B.
Gaming Week Day 3. This egg is the most liked Instagram picture.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right?
Okay, so tell me all about this.
Yikes. See what I mean? However, at St. Dominic Media, we found a much better way to do social.
It is a joy, a pleasure to want to spend time with the Lord and with one another. If you delight in the Lord, he would give you the desires of your heart. And so I prayed him to send me to the right church. And so he led me to the one that he established, which is the Catholic Church.
So I'm sitting in my quiet space, my time with God, praying for my grandchildren.
Understand that the devil isn't only the enemy of our souls, he's the enemy of our human nature. And so what God has joined, he wants to rupture.
Judeo-Christian values.
You corrected it. It's Judeo-Christian values. Your brain corrected it. Oh, that's fantastic. Every year, we produce hundreds of dynamic, faithful Catholic videos that reach millions of people, both online and on television. At St. Dominic Media, we're doing the heavy lifting of creating good, quality Catholic content, and we'd love for you to partner with us, either by visiting stdominicmedia.com and following the share link, or by using the offertory envelopes offered by your parish from OSV. Help us sow seeds far and wide as we use new media's potential for good. Together, let us invest in and grow the kingdom.